And after our previous video went out, Matty Rimac, the CEO of Bugatti, mentioned it wasn't possible to do in a garage.
You can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
Months of silence. One controversial Bugatti rebuild. And now, Rimac has finally spoken. Armstrong's radical project has sparked intense debate across the hypercar world. But the biggest question remained unanswered. What did Bugatti's new owner, Rimac, actually think about it? Then came the response, and it wasn't what many expected. Behind the polished carbon fiber, brutal performance, and outrageous engineering lies a much bigger battle over identity, ownership, and what happens when someone dares to reinvent a machine considered untouchable. Rimac had every reason to stay quiet. Instead, they chose to respond. And their words could completely change the story surrounding Armstrong's rebuild. So, what did Rimac really say, and what does it mean for Bugatti's future? The car nobody was supposed to touch. A wrecked Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport is not something you find in a normal used car lot. This one showed up on Copart, a salvage auction site, looking like it had lost a fight it never should have been in. The front end was crushed. The airbags had gone off. Somewhere under all that damage sat a car worth close to $6 million when new and only 60 of them exist in the entire world. That number alone should tell you something. This wasn't just an expensive car. It was one of the rarest machines on the road, now sitting broken in a salvage lot like any other wreck. The car belonged to Alex Gonzalez, a content creator from Miami who goes by FX Alex GYT online. He had crashed it during a stunt.
If you guys don't know, yes, the Bugatti has been crashed. I'm going to try and disclose as much information as I can.
Was the kind of financial gut punch most people never recover from. Bugatti looked at the damage and came back with a repair quote of roughly $1.7 million. That's not a typo. That's the price of fixing one car more than most people will earn in a decade, just to make one hypercar drivable again. Gonzalez said no. He wasn't willing to pour that kind of money into a repair, and honestly, it's hard to blame him. But that single decision, walking away instead of paying up, set off a chain reaction that would dominate automotive YouTube for the next year. Nobody could have guessed it at the time. It looked like the end of the story. It was actually the beginning. Enter Matt Armstrong. If you've spent any time watching car content, his name probably rings a bell. He's the UK mechanic with millions of subscribers who built his entire channel around rebuilding wrecked exotics that everyone else had given up on. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Rolls-Royces. He's taken them all apart and put them back together in his own garage, usually with his dad Tony standing right beside him.
Yeah, I think my dad really enjoys it. He's been a mechanic his whole life and had to deal with customers. He didn't necessarily want to be a mechanic. He was like carpentry, I'm sure.
Viewers don't just watch him fix cars. They watch him take on projects that seem impossible and slowly prove they're not. But this Bugatti was different. This wasn't just another rebuild. This was a car so rare, so complex, and so tied up in corporate liability that the moment Armstrong agreed to take it on, he wasn't just fixing a vehicle anymore. He was stepping into a fight with one of the most protective manufacturers on the planet, a company that had never had to deal with someone quite like him before. The damage told its own story. The front end had crumpled badly enough to deploy every airbag in the cabin. Carbon fiber panels had cracked.
All the damaged body panels off the car, the windscreen out, and all of the deployed airbags.
Everyone who's got an Audi A3, you have a Bugatti in the airbag.
And once Armstrong's team got deeper into the car, they found something worse. The gearbox housing had shattered completely, and the transmission mounts had torn clean through. This wasn't cosmetic work. This wasn't a bumper swap or a panel respray. This was structural, the kind of damage that touches the very frame holding the car together. the part of any vehicle you can least afford to get wrong. Then came the move that changed everything. Bugatti didn't just decline to help. They locked the car's VIN in their system. That single action meant no authorized Bugatti dealer anywhere in the world could sell parts for that specific chassis. It wasn't a suggestion or a warning. It was a wall built brick by brick, specifically to keep this car from being fixed outside the factory. Armstrong wasn't just working without support. He was working against a wall the manufacturer had built on purpose, knowing exactly what it would mean for anyone crazy enough to try. Most people would have walked away right there. Armstrong didn't. And that decision, the choice to keep going, when every official door had been shut in his face, is exactly what pulled Bugatti's CEO into a conversation he clearly didn't want to have. At least not yet. Blacklisted and alone. Try to picture the position Armstrong was actually in. He had a car worth millions sitting in his garage, torn apart, with a shattered gearbox housing and ripped transmission mounts staring back at him. Under normal circumstances, this is where you call the manufacturer, order the parts, and get to work. Bugatti had made sure that wasn't an option, and that reality alone would have stopped most rebuild projects before they even started. The blacklist wasn't a rumor. It was real, and it was deliberate. Every dealership Armstrong could think to call gave him the same answer. The VIN was flagged. No parts would be released for that car. Full stop. For a company that builds some of the most expensive vehicles on Earth, protecting their reputation clearly mattered more than one independent rebuild, even one being watched by millions of people online. There was no gray area here, no dealer willing to quietly bend the rules. The system had been locked shut from the top down. So Armstrong did what he's always done. He improvised. When a coolant overflow pipe needed replacing and no Bugatti part was coming, his team fabricated a solution using a section of rigid brake hose. It worked.
The engine could go back down and there's more pipes to add onto it. Aircon pipes and then oil return pipes go into the tank which provides all the oil for the gearbox on the side.
It wasn't factory original, but it worked. And that became something of a theme throughout the entire project, solving problems with whatever was actually available instead of waiting for permission that was never going to come. Every fix like this chipped away at the idea that only Bugatti's own factory could touch a car like this. Small details kept surfacing that made the car feel almost human in its imperfections. Armstrong pointed out, almost laughing, that the accelerator pedal on a multi-million-dollar hypercar was just a piece of molded plastic, not the machined billet aluminum people might expect. For a car built to represent the absolute peak of automotive engineering, it was a strange, almost funny reminder that even Bugatti cuts corners somewhere. Viewers latched onto moments like this. It made an untouchable car feel, for a second, a little more ordinary. But humor aside, the situation was serious. Armstrong put out what amounted to a public plea for support. He needed parts. He needed information. And he needed Bugatti to at least acknowledge that this rebuild was happening, whether they approved of it or not. This wasn't a stunt for views. It was a mechanic staring at a shattered gearbox with no legitimate way forward, hoping someone with actual authority would finally answer. That plea didn't disappear into the void. It reached exactly the people Armstrong hoped it would, the top of Bugatti's leadership. And that's when things started to shift, though not in the way anyone expected. Because it wasn't a quiet email from a customer service department. It was Rimac himself, CEO of both Bugatti and Rimac, stepping directly into the conversation.
I'm Rimac, founder and CEO of Rimac Automobile.
The blacklist Bugatti had built to keep outsiders away from their cars had somehow led straight to their CEO. And once Rimac decided to respond, the entire story shifted from a mechanic's garage in the UK to boardroom-level attention in France. What started as a quiet standoff between one YouTuber and a faceless corporate policy was about to become something much bigger and much more public than anyone on either side had planned for. Rimac breaks the silence. When Mate Rimac finally spoke, he didn't do it through a press release written by a PR team. He took to Instagram directly, addressing Armstrong's rebuild in his own words. After months of Bugatti staying quiet, while Armstrong documented every twist of the project, the silence broke all at once. There was no warning, no teaser, no corporate buildup. One day it simply wasn't there, and the next it was everywhere. Rimac didn't hold back on the specifics. He said plainly that a lot of what people were hearing online about Bugatti's parts and repair costs simply wasn't true. Numbers had been floating around social media for months, and according to Rimac, most of them were inflated. He went further, walking through actual part costs himself, trying to correct the record in real time. For a CEO of a company that rarely explains its pricing to outsiders, this was already unusual. He wasn't just defending Bugatti's reputation. He was pulling back the curtain on numbers the brand had never bothered to clarify before. Then he addressed something that had been quietly circulating in comment sections for weeks: the idea that some of the rebuild might rely on 3D printed components. Rimac shut that down immediately and firmly. Bugatti parts, he made clear, are not something you print. The tolerances, the materials, the engineering behind every component are far too precise for that kind of shortcut, and he wanted no confusion about where the company stood on it. It wasn't a soft dismissal either. He spoke like someone who had seen the rumors spread too far and wanted it stopped at the source, once and for all. But the most interesting part of Rimac's response wasn't what he ruled out. It was what he offered instead. He said the Chiron Pour Sport would be welcome at Bugatti's factory in Molsheim, France, if Armstrong wanted to fly it over. Given the scale of the damage, that repair would likely mean splitting the car in two, a full factory-level rebuild, done the way Bugatti has always done it. It was a specific, almost technical detail to include, and it told viewers something important. Rimac wasn't speaking in vague reassurances. He understood exactly what this repair would take, down to the fact that the car might need to be physically separated to fix it properly. It was, in a strange way, an olive branch. Not full-throated support for Armstrong's independent approach, but not total rejection either. Rimac framed it as a safety concern more than a corporate ego issue. A car this complex, he argued, needed manufacturer-level equipment and expertise. Anything less risked long-term reliability, or worse. He wasn't threatening Armstrong. He was warning him, the way someone warns a friend they respect but still disagree with. For a company that had spent months saying nothing, this was a lot to unpack in one video. Rimac had corrected the pricing rumors, closed the door on 3D printing, and opened a door to Molsheim, all while still keeping the VIN blacklist technically in place. It wasn't a full surrender. It also wasn't silence anymore. In just a few minutes of footage, Bugatti had gone from a company that refused to engage at all to one that was actively shaping the public conversation around its own most controversial car. What made it land even harder was the format itself. This wasn't filtered through a spokesperson or buried in a written statement nobody would read. It was Rimac, on camera, speaking directly to an audience that had been following every twist of this story for months. That choice alone changed how people received it. A written statement might have felt like damage control. A video felt like a real answer. And for Armstrong, watching all of this unfold, there was one detail that stuck with him more than anything else Rimac said. It wasn't the pricing correction. It wasn't the Molsheim offer. It was the simple fact that the CEO of Bugatti had been watching his videos closely enough to respond to them personally. Not a legal team, not a communications department. The man actually running the company had sat down, watched the rebuild, and decided it was worth addressing himself. For Armstrong, that single realization said more about how far this story had traveled than anything written in the response itself. Two sides, one story. Armstrong's reaction to Rimac's video wasn't defensive. If anything, he seemed almost stunned.
But we just don't think it's safe, and that's why we can't support it.
In his own follow-up upload, he admitted he hadn't expected Bugatti's leadership to be paying this much attention to a garage rebuild happening thousands of miles away. He said he didn't want any bad blood with the company. He just wanted a path forward that didn't cost $1.7 million. It was a simple, honest response, and it caught a lot of viewers off guard after weeks of speculation about a possible feud. He also made something clear that a lot of viewers had been wondering about. He wasn't giving up on the at-home rebuild. Molsheim wasn't the answer he was looking for, and he intended to keep working on the Chiron himself, with or without Bugatti's official blessing. That single line settled the biggest question hanging over the whole saga. This wasn't ending with the car getting shipped off to France. That determination eventually led to one of the more revealing moments in the entire saga, not on YouTube, but on a podcast. Armstrong sat down with Rob Moore and Carl Hartley on Cars and Money, and finally opened up about what the relationship with Rimac actually felt like behind the scenes, away from the cameras and the comment sections. It was a different kind of conversation, slower and more reflective than anything a YouTube upload usually allows for. His comparison was almost unexpected. He described the dynamic between himself and Rimac as something like a Messi and Ronaldo rivalry. Two people operating in the same space, both respected, both aware of each other, but constantly framed by outsiders as bitter enemies, when the reality was far less dramatic. According to Armstrong, they shared mutual friends. They both loved cars. The tension people saw online wasn't really coming from either of them directly. It was coming from how the internet chose to interpret every video and every response. It was a comparison that reframed the entire saga in a way most viewers hadn't considered. Armstrong put it simply. His videos would go out, Rimac would respond, and then the internet would take that exchange and blow it into something far bigger than it actually was. What looked like a corporate standoff from the outside felt, to Armstrong, more like two professionals navigating a complicated situation in public, with millions of strangers reading tension into every sentence. He wasn't describing a rivalry built on resentment. He was describing two people trying to do their jobs, while an audience treated every move like a chess match. That doesn't mean everyone agreed with how it played out. Some fans sided firmly with Armstrong, arguing that if Bugatti didn't want outsiders touching their cars, Gonzalez should have simply sold the wreck straight from insurance before it ever hit auction. It was a fair point, and plenty of viewers repeated it in the comments. Others pushed back hard, pointing out the very real brand risk Bugatti was managing. One commenter put it bluntly, Armstrong might have good intentions, but that doesn't erase the liability a company like Bugatti has to think about every single day. Both sides had a point, and neither side was fully wrong. There wasn't a clean winner in the public debate, and maybe that was the point. This was never a simple story of a manufacturer versus a mechanic. It was two people managing very different responsibilities, both trying to protect something they cared about. Armstrong protecting his reputation for finishing impossible builds, and Rimac protecting a brand built on decades of precision and control. Seen that way, the whole saga stops looking like a fight and starts looking like two very different definitions of respect, playing out in front of an audience that couldn't always tell the difference. What actually changed? Here's where the story stops being just about words and starts being about action. Because after Rimac's public response, something did shift. Bugatti eventually lifted parts of the blacklist on the Chiron per Sport. They also reduced their original repair estimates, walking back some of the numbers that had sparked so much controversy in the first place. For a project that had been stuck for months with no official support at all, that shift mattered more than any single sentence Rimac had said on camera. That's not nothing. A company known for tightly controlling every aspect of its brand had, at least partially, opened the door it once slammed shut. Whether that happened because of genuine goodwill, mounting public pressure, or simply because Rimac realized the story wasn't going away on its own, is something only Bugatti's leadership really knows. What's clear is that the pressure of millions of people watching every update had an effect, even if nobody at Bugatti would frame it that way publicly. What we do know is that this wasn't Armstrong's first rodeo with this exact company. Long before the Chiron project, he had already rebuilt a wrecked Bugatti Veyron in his own garage, entirely outside the factory system. When it was finished, he didn't just keep it.
Seem to run pretty good now. When we put the new maths in, we can also put the air filters in as well, and that'll finish the full service. So let me show you guys the maths, put them in.
He drove it straight to Bugatti to get their reaction in person. It was a bold move, showing up uninvited with proof that the impossible had already been done once before. Their response back then was a mix of respect and caution. Bugatti called it, in their own words, close to impossible for what they described as a man in a shed to properly repair a car that's sophisticated. But their real concern wasn't just whether Armstrong could physically finish the job. It was whether the finished car could be trusted long-term, especially at the speeds and forces a Bugatti is built to handle. Their doubts weren't really about skill. They were about what happens after the cameras stop rolling. That history matters here, because it shows this Chiron situation wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern. Armstrong keeps taking on projects everyone assumes are beyond an independent garage. Bugatti keeps responding with a mix of concern and, eventually, grudging acknowledgement. And each time, the finished result forces the conversation forward a little further than it was before. What started as skepticism has slowly turned into something closer to reluctant respect. There's also a detail that adds an unexpected layer to all of this. Rimac is headquartered in Sveta Nedelja, Croatia, and Mate Rimac himself lives near Zagreb, also in Croatia.
The Mate Rimac himself, thank you very much for having us. This brand new multi-billion euro spaceship is the Rimac campus, just southwest of Zagreb in Croatia.
He's known for being active on social media, engaging directly, rather than hiding behind corporate statements. That personal presence online is likely a big part of why this whole exchange became public in the first place. A more traditional, hands-off CEO might never have responded to Armstrong at all, and this entire saga could have stayed a one-sided story with no reply from the other side. So where does that leave things now? The Chiron per sport is still being pieced back together, part by part, in Armstrong's garage. Some official Bugatti parts are flowing again. Some improvised fixes remain in place, quietly doing the job a genuine component would normally do. And the relationship between Armstrong and Rimac continues in that strange, semi-public space, not quite rivalry, not quite partnership, but something the internet keeps watching closely, regardless of what it actually is. Every new clip seems to add another layer to a story that refuses to sit still. Nobody expects this story to end quietly. Given how much attention every twist has already received, there's a good chance we haven't heard the last update from either side. If anything, the silence Rimac finally broke may turn out to be just the first of many exchanges still to come. So after months of silence, Rimac didn't just respond, he corrected the record, drew a hard line on 3D printed parts, and still left the door open to Molsheim. Armstrong took the acknowledgement, kept his tools out, and kept building anyway. Whether you see this as a manufacturer finally showing respect, or a mechanic proving a point no boardroom could argue with, one thing is clear: this rebuild changed how people talk about garage builds versus factory control. If you think Armstrong should finish this his own way, drop a comment and let us know. And if a story like this is worth following closely, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens when this Chiron finally hits the road. Like this video if you want more real, unfiltered stories from the world of hypercars.